Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to continue on with our canning shelf build. Today is going to be the top portion of the shelving. In the last video, I showed you guys the bottom section. If you haven't seen that video, I'll leave the link right here on the screen. You can go check that out and then come watch this one. I'm in the process of renovating our whole basement, so I'm going to bring you guys along the process and show you each step that I go through to finish it off. But I'm going to jump right into cutting everything and assembling that top section. From the last build with the bottom portion of the shelving, I had a bunch of these scraps that were about 1 foot to 14 inches wide that I couldn't use of this nice plywood. I'm going to cut those down to size and use that for the top portion. These shelves are not as deep as the other ones. They're up higher and I wanted them to be a little more shallow, so this is going to work perfectly. Plus I get to use up all my scraps. Next, I need to cut some grooves for the shelving to set down into, and previously in the last build I used a table saw. Those pieces of plywood were a lot wider and I could use a dado blade and have enough stability to cut a straight line. For this it's too narrow, so instead I'm just going to use my router with a simple guide that I made real quick to clamp onto these pieces of plywood and cut that groove for the shelving. Once that's done, I'm going to move on to cutting the shelves to size, and I have right here a whole bunch of sweet gum that I milled from a tree in our backyard. I cut that down, milled it, dried it out, and now I can start using it. If you want to see those videos, I actually made videos on that process, so you can go check that out. But once I have them trimmed down to the width, I'll cut them down to length. I'm cutting both sides to make sure that they're square on both sides, and I'm cutting off any of the bad spots on these boards. But this is beautiful wood, some that came right from our yard and free at this point. Just took a lot of work on my part, but now I can finally use it. Then I'll be cutting some 4-inch strips of plywood. This will be used as some blocking for the shelving. I can tie everything together. It'll give it a lot more strength. Now that I have everything cut out, it's finally time to start assembling, and the first step is gluing and fastening the shelves into place. Before I can do that, I'm going to take my plane and I'm going to taper the very edge of this board so that it goes into the groove a little bit better, because a lot of these boards are cupping just slightly, so it would be a little difficult to get it into the groove if I didn't taper it. After gluing and fastening the shelf into place, I'm going to put a few of these clamps on it just to make sure everything's staying square and I can move along with the other shelves while that glue dries. Next, I'll be taking those 4-inch strips of plywood and using those as braces across the top and bottom of the shelf on the back side. This will give me something to nail the plywood that's going on the back of the shelves to, but also strengthen this up and give it more stability. Then the last piece to go on is the top shelf, and this is right up against the ceiling, so it's not going to be used as a shelf, so I'm just using plywood for this. To make sure the plywood doesn't split, I'm going to pre-drill before putting in the screws to fasten it. Now the shelves are built, 4 of these sections in total, and now I'm going to be stapling some 1/4-inch plywood along the back of these shelves. I'm doing this just to clean it up, and I don't have a flat surface to push the shelves up against, so I don't want anything falling off the back and going behind the shelving, so this is perfect for that. Now the plywood is a bit too large for this. I didn't want to trim this out beforehand. It's a little too big to go on my table saw, so I'm stapling it in place and then using a flush cut router bit to trim it down to size. Once I have all 4 of those completed, I'm going to move over to the shelving wall and test out the size. And how things go, sometimes you make mistakes, and in this case I did, but it all worked out in the end. I wanted to leave a gap in between the middle panels so that I have room for this air conditioning Freon line to go in between the cabinets, but I ended up, instead of subtracting an inch, I reverted back to the original size that I initially planned and completely forgot that gap. Now, this all worked out because I was able to just pull the shelves out a little bit further from the wall, and that pipe is just going behind the shelving, and it didn't hurt anything. The shelves just weren't set back as far as I originally planned them to be. I have all the panels in place. Now I'm going to start screwing them together to create one solid piece so these pieces don't move around individually. Once that's done, I can start adding the trim on the front of these shelves to make it look really nice and match the shelves below it. I'm going to be using sweet gum as the trim on the front of these shelves, and this really helps dress it up. It makes it look really nice. It covers up the plywood edges and makes it look all finished off. The plywood, when you paint it, which I'm going to be doing in the next video, ends up showing all the grains, the different textures, the different layers of wood in that plywood, and it just doesn't look great. It doesn't finish well. So covering that up with some nice solid wood will make this a lot better. For the center board, I'm going to be using a 4-inch wide piece because the bottom section, I left that inch off of each panel so that I had a gap for the Freon pipe like I mentioned earlier. I wanted it to match even though I forgot to take that inch off and leave that gap. I'll also be adding trim across the front of the shelves. Now those aren't plywood, so I'm not trying to cover anything up. I just wanted to match the style of all the other shelves and the frame, so I'll be adding a 1-inch strip across each of those. Alright guys, that just about finishes up the video for today. Hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, help me out and hit that like button down below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Also, check out part 3 of this video to see how these shelves turned out. I'm going to be painting and staining these, and they turned out beautifully. So check out that video. I'll leave the link right here at the end. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one.